Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And I think that beginning was definitely what we are aiming for in this session, which is definitely to have a robust community conversation that embodies the spirit of Ubuntu. So thank you so much all for joining us today for this conversation. And I will just begin by introducing myself. My name is Dr. Bettina Boabing-Bedu. I am originally from Ghana, but I've lived most of my life here in South Africa and identify as both. I'm a medical doctor by profession, but I'm also a public health researcher and policy analyst. In this room, I'm wearing two hats. Firstly, as the Values 20 Health Advocacy Lead, with the intention of creating more advocacy for the need for health equality and equity globally and universally, as well as in my position as the director of International Working Group for Health System Strengthening. We are a youth-led policy think tank and institute focused on ensuring that emerging voices are included within the policy discourse space on global topics. And therefore, the G20 conference was a very important one for us to ensure that our voice was heard in the conceptualization as well as in the recommendations that are going to happen in the V20. And that's how I got involved with the World Values team as well as with the V20 team to collaborate with them to provide perspectives from a health point of view and how we can embody values within health systems. And today we're going to be having a collective conversation, and I'm really going to emphasize the word conversation. I am really not a fan of formal panel discussions where we are the panelists and you are the speakers and the audience members and it's a one-way conversation. We really want it to be a two-way discourse about the importance of Ubuntu and community, about how it's understood in South Africa as well as how it's understood in America. And we're so glad to partner with the US Values Alliance to have this discussion today. Also, because next year the USA is going to be hosting the Values Conference as well as the G20 Conference. I think this is a very important, maybe, segue and partnership towards that. But I think as well in terms of where we are in our world and the kind of conflict, division that we are seeing, I think now more than ever is a time for us to have critical discourse and conversation about Ubuntu and about community and how we are understanding it moving forward. So that is how we all came to be in this room. And in terms of why I thought it was important for the health advocacy team to be leading this conversation, I think now more than ever, we're seeing a breakdown in global solidarity when it comes to health, with the pulling of USAID funding from so many communities, with the withdrawing of so many institutions from global partnerships that are important in health. Now more than ever, we need a reimagination of why is a community-centered, Ubuntu-centered approach towards healthcare very, very important. And that's why we thought leading this conversation and having this conversation was important. So really welcome to everybody in this room. I'm sure we're going to get to know each other more as this conversation goes on and as this conversation happens. To start off with, I am joined by three really amazing people just to kind of steer us in the right direction to the conversation that we're going to be having. And I'm going to introduce them to you very, very soon. I'm going to go one by one and I'm going to ask each of them a question as I introduce them so we can start this conversation and get the ball rolling. So firstly, to welcome up Dr. Dumi, Dr. Dumi Magadlela, who is the founder and CEO of African Coaching. He is the founder of a boutique company working with executives, leaders, and their teams across multiple sectors globally. He's also a senior practitioner coach who teaches coaching, leadership, and team coaching in multiple training platforms. And particularly in this work, Dr. Dumi is the co-founder of the Ubuntu Coaching Foundation. So I think he is the perfect person to help us and to start off this conversation answering two questions for us, Dr. Dumi. Firstly, what is this term Ubuntu that we always speak about in South Africa? And secondly, why do you think it is important that we are speaking about and need Ubuntu today? Thank you, Dr. Dumi.
Thank you, Bettina. Before I kick off, David, Dr. Tabea is still struggling to connect. You can resend to her email the link that we are all connected on.
I did. I will try and send it again. Maybe I'll just copy Bettina this time in case make sure the emails go through. Okay, of course.
Yeah, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And greetings, everyone, from Johannesburg, South Africa. it's in the Southern Hemisphere. For anyone who's geographically challenged, we know these things happen. I would like to keep this nice and light. There's too much tension and intensity and all that in the world today. And we need to find our laugh. We need to find our humor. We need to find each other. So I would like to start by inviting all of us to just, if we can, just close your eyes if you like, or just put both your feet on the ground.
I'm on a Zoom.
And just be here. Just totally be here. It's up to you to close your eyes or just keep them open. Just take a deep breath. And appreciate this moment of connection with others from different parts of our planet. Thank you. Thank you, Bettina, for the question. Ubuntu, what is it and why does the world need it? Ubuntu is human essence. It's the essence of being human or being humane. It means far more than I am because we are. It is the recognition that we are inherently, inextricably interconnected as fellow human beings. Ubuntu is that core that connects all of us. In other words, it's the software that humanity needs to co-create nourishing relationships globally. And we all have access to it. We all can tap into it. Ubuntu is that part of you that when you see someone beheading someone somewhere in a part of the world you've never been, something in you recoils. What's that? It's a stranger. You never met that person. You don't know them. So what's the problem? It's not your cousin. But what's that? We are so powerfully interconnected, and we have numbed that in us by programming and conditioning ourselves to be separate. So I'm going to share one slide and then move on from there. And then you can move on to our other panelists. It's a quick slide, if I can share that very quickly. And then you can read it at your own. I'll put it in the chat when I'm done, but I want to highlight this part here now. Allow me to put this, and then I'll read one piece in it, and then we'll move on. If you can see that, please tell me if you can see that.
Yes. So
as humans, we have a thing called Ubuntu. It's for all of us. We have access to it, all of us. It is about the essence of being human, being humane, and it is part of the gift that we all can give to each other, to our shared world. And it embraces hospitality, caring about others. And my humanity is caught up and bound up in yours. And when I dehumanize you, I inexorably or inescapably dehumanize myself. And the solitary human being is a contradiction in terms, doesn't exist. And therefore you seek to work for the common good because your humanity, my humanity, comes into its own in community, in belonging, and we belong to each other. Ignore the hands of the person holding the planet. That's your grandmother, because we all come from this part of the world. Thank you, Bettina.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dumi, and we will be unpacking that more, but thank you so much for that beautiful and calming introduction. I definitely feel a lot more grounded in this space and in this conversation. So thank you so much for that. And I think now to move to Joanne. Joanne, thank you for joining us in this session today. Joanne is a visionary artist, speaker and performer, community connector who inspires audiences through talks on gratitude, laughter, affirmation art, and the power of collective creativity. Her project, The Manifesting Mobile, is growing to become the world's largest community engagement art project. That's such a beautiful phenomenon. I'd love to hear more about that. But Joanne, I'd love to ask you, how is community understood in America? I think we often hear about community from the American perspective. How is it understood there? And are there any differences, similarities to Ubuntu, as Dr. Dumi has explained?
Okay, wow, this is such a good question. And well, first of all, I am so grateful that I've discovered the word Ubuntu. I'm so sorry, I'm nervous. Ubuntu. Okay, just breathe it. Let spirit tell it to you, right? Because it is such I am as you, namaste. There's all these cultures around the world that have that same meaning, right? And I think it's so powerful that we are at this opportunity in time that we can connect with people to see that we all want the same thing. We all want the same thing, love, family, purpose. And so I grew up wanting to live in a big city like Manhattan, New York City, and I did, and it was amazing. I had a little community in my apartment building of 24 apartments, which I loved creating. But when I moved to Savannah, Georgia in 2010, small town, smaller city in the United States on the East Coast, I never thought I'd ever live in the South, just not for any reason, just didn't ever call me, and never thought I'd live in a small town. Wanted to be a big city person, right? But it's been 15 years since I've left New York, and it's been 12 years since I've really got involved with the Savannah community. And it is so powerful to have a community that has your back on so many levels. And it's the people, the nonprofits, it's the neighbors, and not to say that there are not, conflict, and there is definitely, but I have never been so inspired to do the creative work that I do based on getting to know local community. And people are doing they're trying their best. There's, again, I'm gonna stop saying this. There's bickering, but so many people, the people who understand that we are alike, that we're stronger together, gets really gets more voices. It really does. When I first came to Savannah in 2012, there was not a lot of activism in the street, in a sense, where I went to a pro-choice march in the park here, and I thought, because I'm a feminist, I'll go to pro-choice. There were like 30 people there. Fast forward, there was like over 1,000 people there in the past couple of years, because people are standing up and they're seeing the value, seeing each other. And then in 2012, I ended up traveling across the country from Savannah out to California and back over a 6-month period of time. And I did it living in my minivan. I was 46 years old, didn't really have a plan. I had a vision. I had some ideas, but I spent a lot of the time allowing myself to meet people who would then tell me another place to go. And every city I went to, I met amazing local community. I mean, I can say how much I love local community here in Savannah, but I never say it's the best. There is not a best thing in this country or in this world. We're all the best, right? And so that made me realize the power of connecting local community, because the locals are where we can get stuff done. We have more power here. Like, I know city council members here, but in a bigger city, it's the money. So how do we reclaim our power in local communities? But you have to be very welcoming, and you have to allow people, and this is the part that I'm learning to understand more about, the racism and the distrust of people who don't look like you. And I grew up in a very middle-class Lutheran background, married, parents were still married, and very nice people. And they weren't outwardly racist, but they were definitely products of, the systemic racism in our country, and they were lied to, right? But coming here and just seeing how things are so different, but at the same time, the courage and the persistence of the African American communities in the South to say, screw this, we're going to keep moving forward. And there's so much power, and the children of the children of the children are just so inspiring. I met so many young 20-year-olds and early 30-year-olds in the last 15 years, and they are such strong business leaders, and they're making a change. And it's like we have to just remember things take time and not give up. And the way we don't give up is just know your community, and and just, yeah. So that's, I could keep talking, but I'm very inspired by everybody who wants to step into understanding that we are here to love.
Yeah. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you. That is such a beautiful opening for us. And I think a segue into the question that I want to pose to David. David, welcome to you. Thank you for joining us in the session. I'm sure most of us here know David, but David leads several organizations with a desire to contribute to a more beautiful world. He leads the U.S. Values Alliance, the Wellbeing Economy Alliance California, as well as Good Government Los Angeles. And I think, David, maybe to now start getting into some of the questions that have been on my mind. I think the idea of community is under attack in very strange ways. I think it's being emphasized in certain circles, but it's being emphasized in exclusion, right? So it's saying that we need to defend our community, but our community is only those who look like us, who live where we live, who have our religion, who have our nationality, and everybody else is other. So I think the question I want to ask is, how do we hold true to the smaller sense of community that Joanne spoke about now, but still being cognizant of the wider community of humanity, that we're not creating an us versus them in our conceptualization of what is community and who is community?
How come you saved the hard question for me? No, I'm glad to be able to add perspective, because as I was listening to Dumi and Joanne, I thought, God, I'm not as positive and optimistic as they are in their outlook. I want to add some negativity into this. So I'm glad that you gave me the opportunity to do that. Yeah, I wonder about that question a lot. I think it seems to me, at least here where I know Los Angeles and America, that there is not, to me, a strong sense of community. That even in a very local place, people are very fragmented, don't necessarily know their neighbors, aren't well connected. So I think there may be, as you described, certain sort of communities of likeness where, oh, we go to the same church or temple, or we all do art class together, or we're, swimming, and that people do sort of pair up in that. But I think the problem is even a little deeper in that, at least from my perspective, and part of the reason I do the different work that I do, is that as we feel unstable or uncomfortable, I'm speaking for myself, but hear this a lot too, that we look for things in others to sort of pick ourselves up by putting them down and trying to create that othering. And anytime, again, speaking mostly from my experience, if I'm having tension or frustration with someone, sometimes it's easier just to disconnect, especially in a city of 10 million people, that it's very easy to go just somewhere else and hide rather than deal with the issue and resolve it and look at, what am I bringing to this issue that maybe I could do better? And so that's kind of where my love for values has come in, is trying to keep me on my North Star. Like, okay, I'm having an experience. I'd like to walk away. I'd like to give up on this relationship. But what's really important to me in my life? What are the values that matter most? And so I think trying to inspire people who are in community to work through those issues together, to not give up on each other, is the way that, and, I don't, when I look at the beautiful description that you shared of Ubuntu, I don't think that's how Americans see togetherness or community. I think that we think of it as a collection of people, not as people that are interdependent and interwoven, which is, I think, really what it is. And so there's a lot of room for growth in how we view community here, just even trying to hit our own normal standard, much less elevating it to something more beautiful.
Sure, that's so powerful, David. I think I never thought about that difference in terms of, I think Ubuntu really goes further in this idea of community, to say that my well-being is inextricably linked to your joy and to your prosperity. And it's not just that I am similar to you, therefore we are community, but that you are me, and I, like, your happiness is integral to who I am as an individual. And I think then, Dumi, a question that often comes up in critique to Ubuntu is, do you think that the way we have structured, maybe for the lack of a better word, the more westernized, individualized, way that we live now, is that conducive to an Ubuntu philosophy? Many people argue that we cannot export Ubuntu outside of Africa, outside of communal living, because the way that we live is too individual to really hold true to this idea of my happiness being so inextricably linked to yours. Where do you fall on that philosophical thinking?
Why do you give me easy questions? No, seriously, yes. We need to, and we here includes every fellow human being, all 8+ billion of us. I think the call is for us to really come back home to who we are. We programmed and taught, socialized, and enculturated to believe that we separate, and that we like to do that. Maybe it makes things much easier to separate and have little pockets here. And it's the human brain loves to do that. Right? If I meet you, David, I have a box for you. You belong into this one here, a white Caucasian male. Yeah. Is he a threat or is he a friend? Is it what do we do with each other when we meet each other? When you see me talk down, what do you call it? Dark, tall, and handsome, and with the nice weave of hair that I have. Yeah, you got my point. You got a box for that. Which box do I belong to? I love how, John, you put the community part of it. There's a community everywhere. And these communities can interlock and be related to each other. It is very, very important for me as a fellow human being that my children and my children's children and those of my neighbors and the village that I'm part of, which is all of you, that we recognize that we have a responsibility towards each other to co-create spaces where everybody can flourish. Everyone has unique gifts that they come to express during their lifetime. And our work together is to co-create spaces where everyone can express and deploy their gifts towards the greater good of everyone else. And we start that by seeing each other as extensions of each other. And that is Ubuntu intelligence. It is very important to do that. And I want to come home to what we're doing in South Africa right now. We are hosting, as presidents of the G20, we're hosting G20 in a month or so. And we have V20, which is the Values 20, which is why we're here, Bettina and others, on that as part of values. For me, US Values Alliance is a gift to all of us to really work together on this. And as part of the V20, part of my leadership here, Prof. Bonang Mohale, Dr. Priya Daya, and Dr. Tabea, who's still struggling to connect, what they have said we do in these spaces to share what it is we are doing. Our president said we have 3 major streams under Values 20, and that is solidarity, which I'm co-leading as a stream in that. I'm coming to the point about what we need here. Solidarity stream I co-lead with a colleague called Temba, and there's equality, there's sustainable development. It's understanding that we need values of Ubuntu, values of human integrity, human dignity, values of human agency are part of the V20, what we're doing now. And we're going to be handing this over to our counterparts and colleagues in the US, as the US is going to be host of G20 next year. We need to continue this conversation about the values that humanity needs today, whether in politics, in business, in civil society, in communities. What are the values that bring us together, that form those communities that we are part of? How far do we extend in holding that community, the human family, the human community? Which part of human do I belong to? Which part do I not belong to? And what are the reasons behind that? So I'm not answering your question directly intentionally, because I want to broaden this. We need to start to ask ourselves, what are we doing here? Thanks, Bettina.
Thank you, Dumi. Thank you. And I think that really gets me thinking, how do we get people to start seeing that extension of themselves, to start seeing themselves as being part of community? And I know, Joanne, that a lot of your work is in the power of creativity, to be able to really give us a visual and I think a feel for that representation. We've been thinking around, how do we enact Ubuntu within policy? But I think a lot of your work is questioning, how do we actually make people experience that sense of Ubuntu? So how would you advise that we can use creativity to drive home the question that, and the challenge that Dumi is posing to us, to see ourselves as being fundamentally interconnected? Where's the room for creativity to help us to really bring home that idea?
There's so much. I can't, just so much to talk about. But what really showing up for me after listening to Dumi is, it's one, we have that personal responsibility to do things, to take the actions that we want to take to, to live a more community world. But I feel like people are so stressed out. I don't know what it's like in other countries, but I'm sure it's the same everywhere. People are overworked. People have families. People have to drive in traffic, and they're sick. They're so stressed out. And I think that stress level is affecting how people interact with each other. Because I know when I'm a little grumpy, I'm a little like, and I don't want to be that way to somebody that I love and care for. So imagine if you don't know that person, you can be a little, bitchy. So finding ways, and that's where art and creativity can come in, is finding ways to relax, because everybody has different practices of meditation, prayer, et cetera, right? And so what I aim to do is to make my work really simple, because don't they say if you want someone to understand, it has to be an 8-year-old can understand it. So really, really simple. And also as adults, we tend to forget the power of drawing or crayons or markers. And I once said to somebody, my friend, like, I can't draw. And best words ever. Yes, you can. You just have to accept the way you draw. So whenever you say you can't do something, yes, you can. If you want to change it, you practice, you work at it, right? And I don't want to spend 80 hours practicing how to draw a naked person. So I'm not going to draw, I'm going to draw my way. So I'm going to share my screen. So what in the early 2000s, I started understanding the power of co-creation. I started understanding the power of words, and I understood the power of gratitude. And we also know people are stressed because they're hurt. I am so saddened by so many people who have had so much trauma happen to them, right? And the fact that so many of them still get up and do things is like, so hurt people are stressed. And so how do we find ways to lessen that pain, and through art and words and experiences? So I'm just going to share my website. It's as you can see, some pictures on it. Can you see? This is so power of words, power of images. This is what I call a manifesting mobile. And all of these circles are representation of what people's visions are for themselves and each other. And so there's circles about cleaning up the planet. There's circles about, education. There's circles about, good jobs for railroads. I have all my stories. but over 50% of the circles are about love. And I'm just going to show this beautiful. I did this event in up in Brunswick, Georgia, in this forest, and there's people drawing the circles, and that's what the project does. You get to walk through it and experience it, but then you also get to make it and be a part of it. And I think that's another thing I think that we recognize that if people don't feel a part of something, then they're going to like think it's not right or it's something's wrong. So you want to try to include people. So all of my art, a lot of my big art projects are all about including the participant in the actual co-creation, and people need to be invited. And so it's like, and when you come together as a creative space, even I love it when people bring out the Post-its and say, okay, everybody, write what you want to write. They put the Post-its up. I mean, that's just as powerful too, you know, but it's like inviting people to come together and offer a like a really non-threatening way to express themselves will totally diffuse what's happening and then gives them space to really go. And it takes a lot of personal desire to want to do this. But I know the more that you, as you share this with other people, you share the positive or what you share, how being who you are to other people, it makes it easier for other people to do it too. And it's not easy. And I 100% love people like David because you need that balance. You know, I'm like, it's work, and who wants to do work? But if we do it together, it's not so hard. And yeah, I'm just babbling.
Thank you so much, Joanne. I'm definitely one of those people who is like, I can't draw. So I'm now have taken the quote from you. It's about accepting how I draw. That has made me feel a lot better. I'm one step there. And I think creativity is such, I mean, even in the health field, there was a whole field called medicine and the arts. And I think so often we think that art belongs in one box. But I think creativity in all spaces really allows us to connect more with our inner humanity. So thank you so much for those reflections, Joanne. And I think, David, to you, I think maybe to ask you, I think one question is, and I think Duni brings this up as well, is how far does my recognition of the other extend? And I think that's okay. And I think most people aren't opposed to that when there aren't consequences to them. So I think now when we start to speak about policy, so for example, does my recognition of the other mean that I owe them welfare, mean that I owe them healthcare, mean that I owe them privileges and benefits? Once we start getting to there, I think we get opposition to Ubuntu that often puts it in the box of socialism or so when I think there was a cost to individuals about extending that humanity, there was pushback. So in this world where I think we're seeing so much pushback on the way that we are constructing societies, how do we deal with that? How do we really position Ubuntu and community in a policy sense, and not just in the sense of it's nice to have until now, we're talking about universal health coverage or we're talking about peace in certain countries and that costs you your own values or costs you something. So how do we hold that tension together?
Can I answer Joanne's question instead? No, and thank you, Joanne. I just want to acknowledge that the art pieces look so fun and so inspiring to be able to do that with other people. So thanks for sharing all that. No, these are questions I think about a lot. And so, I think when you think about it on a global level, I mean, obviously there's so much going on in the US right now in terms of cutting back on the types of things that you're talking about, not just within the US, but to other countries. And I think a lot of that comes from a sense that people need to figure out on themselves. Some of that might actually come from a place of good intentions. I mean, I don't personally feel that way, but I think that, when you break it down onto a more personal level, like when I have friends that are struggling financially or going through an addiction or something else, is the thing just to give them everything they want or to withhold? And how does it feel when I withhold? Like, does it cause me sorrow and pain to withhold? Or is there some more complex, nuanced balance between the two? And it is hard, because I do go through that with certain family members and friends that I want to see them flourish and succeed, but also I don't want to, and this is my opinion, I don't want to keep feeding the problem as opposed to helping them find a way out of the problem. If it just goes into a spiral. So, but there is, I think, just a larger sense that how we feel about money and how we feel about life and safety, and going back to some of the things Joanne said about the stressors. So when people are stressed, they're going to be less loving towards other people. And if we're creating societies, if we're designing the society to be stressful, and I mean, there's a lot of studies showing that all the things that happen when inequality starts to divide further and further, about how more unstable things are. So I think I don't have the exact answers to how we design the perfect system, but I think it goes back to what we're talking about, and something Joanne said. It's going to be easier if we co-design it together than just three of us on this call designing for everyone else on the call. That, there becomes more ideas, more diversity of ideas, more people to lend a hand, so that it's not just two people doing all the work. So I think, a lot of the work that I'm interested in is, how do we co-design better? How do we come together to talk about these tough questions of where resources go, who does what, how we deal with people who just simply can't do things. How do they just get sidelined? And so these are all really hard questions, but having the time and space to talk about them, even though I'm going to borrow a word from Sangam that I learned the other day, activated, that if I get activated internally, how do I manage those feelings and still come back to a place where I can make everyone else feel comfortable to speak? So I think, it's a great example of where just 2 days ago, I learned something from someone who I just met 2 days ago that I'm able to use today.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And I think that it really gets me thinking, especially what you and Joanne are getting at in terms of, I think people are a lot more protective when they feel their needs aren't being met. And I think their ability, therefore, to extend love, to extend grace to others becomes very limited. And I think we see that often in South Africa as well. Dimi, as you know, we have a lot of issues with xenophobia that occurs. And I think a lot of that happens from the insecurity that individuals are facing, the economic hardships that they are facing, which makes it harder and harder to extend grace. I think very, very interesting questions. I think still questions that we are answering in terms of, how do we really move Ubuntu into a policy discourse, into how we redesign structures, redesign the way that we are, thinking of financial institutions, that we're thinking of societal institutions. But I really love the comments that have come up in the chat from Lauren and Alan. And I would love to invite you both maybe just to reflect on what you have shared. I think, Lauren, you were adding to the difference between how Ubuntu is conceptualized in South Africa and community in America, and where those differences are. So, Lauren, if you are able to speak and maybe share a bit more of those reflections with us, we would love to hear them.
Hi. Yeah, sorry, I had my camera off. I was moving inside. It was getting cold out. Yeah, I think hearing you talk, I never really thought about how Americans define community. And I think the descriptions were very accurate. And I think it caused me to reflect on the fact that, yeah, a lot of times, I think community, especially recently, community can be used as kind of a crutch for division, actually, of, using these politicized and racialized identities to other yourself and say, oh, this is my community. And I also think there is a growing movement to identify the unit of analysis, like your default unit of analysis in the US is like a nuclear family. And that I think is really sad in a lot of ways that, you deny the humanity of everyone else outside of those people. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's very refreshing to think about us all being connected just because we're human. And I think that's how I personally feel. And I think it's a really refreshing way to imagine the world being centered on that.
Mm. That's beautiful, Lauren. That's so beautiful. I think you are so right. I think that's my fear sometimes with the way that community is conceptualized, that it is us versus them. And how do we identify it? I don't think it often extends to broader humanity, and that anybody in the world can be an extension of you, and you don't have to look like them or be in the same kind of community in order for them to be deserving of humanity. So thank you so much for those really pivotal reflections. I saw Richard's hand go up, so that's very exciting. Richard, what would you like to contribute?
First of all, thank you so very much for this opportunity to be on the call. I was invited by my daughter, Rochelle. I didn't know I was going to be a part of such a wonderful conversation. I do affirm the nature of community and what's been expressed about us here in the United States. However, Martin Luther King Jr. Had a concept of the beloved community, which could, in fact, bring all of these divided communities together in a strategic manner that is very much like the concept of Ubuntu. I think we do need a paradigm shift here in terms of the way we understand ontologically our relationships with one another, because there is a true interconnectedness in the in the metaphysical realm. I would argue that then manifests itself in division, but it's really all one. So that's my little bit. Thank you.
Beautiful. I would love to hear more about Martin Luther King's vision of community and how you see it differing to what's happening in America now, if you are able to expand.
Oh, absolutely. The Club community is a way of achieving cooperation amongst various divisions within society, using nonviolence, using the principles and values that you've been talking about here on the call. It's not a utopia, but it is a way of working through our differences through the concepts of love, nonviolence, and community.
It's beautiful. It's like the matrix of smaller communities coming together through cooperation.
And not only on a small scale, but he would see this as what we need to be doing internationally as well.
Beautiful. I love that. It's called the beloved community. That's a term for us to go back and. That is excellent. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for adding those thoughts. And I think, Alan, you were getting to the scientific basis as to why Ubuntu is correct. I think that's very interesting. If you would help us and talk us through what the scientific evidence of it is.
Yeah, I was simply quoting Richard because when I looked at his article that he put in the chat, that just jumped out at me. So I thought it was worth sharing for everybody. But a couple of thoughts, if I may. First, Lauren referred to how community, I rephrase it as the word community seems to have been hijacked and it's being used for something that isn't actually a community. It's, a lynch mob is not a community. And people seem to be using the word community for a bunch of people that all stand for something, whatever it is. So that is a challenge to start with if we're not using the word as it's intended. Then I'm going to join David's more pessimistic style for a short while, because I don't think we should be surprised that we're faced with what we are faced with in certain parts of the world when community used to be provided by pillars in society which have been diluted, and three of them are religion, family, and local communities. So if those three, if you agree that they have been diluted over time, it shouldn't really surprise us that it's more of a challenge for there to be a real sense of community. And then just finally, I was thinking, well, so if that's the case, what do we need for there to be a flourishing community? And three things come to mind. The first is good intention by leadership, which sadly doesn't seem to be the case all of the time. Then authenticity, so people being transparent and sharing the truth as far as they know it, which doesn't seem to be in place some of the time. And then finally, a recognition of the importance of the environment in which we exist and a conscious effort to design that so that it gives us what we want. So a little bit like a garden, you don't shout at a flower to grow taller. You just make sure that it's got the right amount of sun and nutrients and water, and it will do the job itself. So I feel that we've lost sight of the importance of tending to the environment. So there are some thoughts.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you so much. And I think those are very interesting thoughts for us to be thinking about. And when you said the word lynch mob, and how community has been hijacked, I think Barbara, the comment that you put in the chat, I think really relates so well to that. And I think the difference you're trying to sort of maybe point at, the difference between a tribe and the difference with a community. Could you maybe just help us with that differentiation and how you are understanding it?
So nice to meet you all. This is for Joanne's the only person I've actually know, but I've been on your mailing list for quite some time. I usually have a conflict during this time frame. Tribe, I think the concept of tribe really was originally meant more around community, but tribe in the sense of when you're trying to defend yourself against a foe. And so, especially here in the United States, and I do work with individuals in other countries. I'm a community, so I've done work for our federal government, and I did work for this administration the first time around. So I have a lot of thoughts on that. But my company, Purpose-Filled Solutions and Evolutions, when we write the word community, we actually capitalize the unity. And write it that way very deliberately. And when we talk about human beings, borrowed from a friend in a group that Joanne and I both are in, whenever we write human being, we capitalize the BE. Because ultimately everything that I've done in my more than 3 decades career has focused on starting with what we first have in common and working from there and building around that. And two of the greatest successes that I love to talk about is in the capital of the state of New Jersey in the USA. Back in 2000, we actually got an award because we were able to bring 44 entities with very, very different opinions about how to help improve that community. And we joked, we said if we could get the Trenton area Black clergy and the Trenton area Gay and Lesbian Task Force to come to the same table and find common ground, we had a pathway for solving a lot of issues. And I got to be part of something like that in a city in the United States called Camden, New Jersey, which at one point was labeled one of the most dangerous cities in America. And just this week, after a decade of very intense work with multiple entities coming together, I mean, like what we call reentry citizens having to work with people who were part of the Department of Justice, and gangs, and we don't have in Camden anymore, we don't have law enforcement. We have public safety, changing the language, changing the way we partner. And for the first time in 50 years, there wasn't a single homicide in the entire city of Camden during the summer season. That is unprecedented. I live in a community 14 miles away that can't even say that. And that is because when you recognize the power of bringing everyone together and helping others isn't a deficit to you, it can actually be a surplus. I think those things are what's lost here. Everybody's so much about being on their own or finding people that will stand with them to fight or being my tribe. You're part of my tribe. And when we reframe it as community, just that asset-based word shifts our thinking in terms of how we interact with each other. And it helps people to take off their armor and stand in non-judgment and have conversations that are really difficult but necessary to continue to find more common ground.
Yeah. Wow. That was so beautiful. And I think everything you've said is just so powerful. We're going to remember that community with the unity in both. I think that language shift does something to your mind. It really does actually make you think so much more differently about that word and the power of language and, being able to lead to a paradigm shift in society. So thank you so much for those reflections, Barbara. That was very, very fascinating to think about. Sangam, I'm so sorry. I think I missed your hand at some point that you wanted to share. Please, the floor is yours to contribute your thoughts. So are you on mute if you are?
Okay. I feel I feel inspired by the team because it's really hard to actually to come by people that think similarly. Somehow like this type of thinking has become really unique in our global society. And I think some people are living in community without even realizing it. Like there isn't the context, and then there's also like just the other end. And so when like I grew up in both like a collectivist and an individualistic society. So like from the age of 8, I moved to the US and was living with a white American family. So like I had that individualistic exposure. And then I would go home every other summer to Nepal or India where it was very collectivist. And so like I saw both ends and I saw how both ends at their extremes don't function very well. And so for me, it's like, how do we find that middle ground where we are all thriving? And I think the world has just become so complex. We are all so distracted. And I don't know if it's on purpose or like, like it is, I don't know. And so what, and we also like have accepted the scarcity mindset of, you know, there isn't enough. And that makes people scared, like a lot of people have mentioned. And with my daughter, and like I'm still trying to believe this, although I say this out loud. Like I tell her, I said, there's enough for you, and there's enough for me, and there's leftover. And and I don't know how we allow other people to start even like taking that and even like saying, oh, could that be true? Like, yeah, maybe, just even contemplating that idea. Um, and so individualism comes at like such a high cost, and like a lot of it shows up in mental health. And collectivism comes at a really high cost, which shows up as, not having an individual voice. And so one place that I have seen where the two can exist together is when people meditate together or do yoga together in that way of like, not only do you get to hear your own voice amplified, which can be really scary, but you also get to be in that communal energy that supports your voice being amplified. So thank you. I appreciate everybody here.
So beautiful. And I really love how you've spoken about the tension between either two of the extremes. I think we hardly really look at, even from us from an Ubuntu perspective, what an extreme community perspective could lead to. So thank you for adding that voice. Dr. Dumi, I do know you have a hard stop at the hour, so please, if you could contribute to us, or maybe just take another 5 minutes after Dr. Dumi speaks, but your final contributions and thoughts from the
Thank
session.
you. Thank you, Bettina. Beautiful contributions. I love it from all of you. I can mention each one of you, what you said. Thank you for connecting in this space. So I'm an executive coach. I deal in challenges and questions that take us into spaces. So I'm going to leave you with a challenge, or every single one of you in this call. Notice how you greet people that you meet or encounter for the first time. And from now on, greet them consciously in 3 ways: consciously, intentionally, and mindfully. It's a drop in the ocean of human relationships, but it does incredible stuff. And many ways where I go, I do it. When I travel, I'm flying around in a train, anywhere, I greet so-called strangers consciously, and I've established incredible human relationships around the world. Greet consciously, intentionally, and mindfully, and connect. Radical human connection is what the world needs in this community. Joanne, in this community, David, Bettina, everyone, thank you so much for being here together.
Thank you, Dr.
Gotta go.
Thank you.
Definitely take you on that challenge to greet everybody consciously, intentionally, and mindfully as we move into this space. And really thank you to everyone who has been part of this conversation. I just want to check in with Charles and Melissa. Are there any thoughts that you would like to contribute before I hand back to our panelists just to close off for us with a thought or two?
No, I think I've been very impressed by what everyone said. I just think in terms of values, the value of community, the value of Ubuntu, both are potentially wonderful values to live by. But I do find the word community and the concept community, whatever it is behind it, as many of you have said, I find it quite tricky, really, because it can ideally community can lead us to where Ubuntu, I guess, is, which is this total interconnectedness, the feeling of we rather than I. And I think, in my idealized memory of, I don't know, community I grew up as a child or whatever, it probably wasn't like I remember it, but it was a lot more comfortable, a lot more interconnected, a lot more loving than I see the community around me at the moment. And that's communities really around me at the moment, because there's, our lives are so much more complicated, I suspect, all of us, than they were a little while ago. And we have all these communities, we have online communities, we have local communities, we have sort of other professional communities and all sorts of communities. And individually, a lot of those may be very supportive, very loving, a feeling of we rather than I. But I don't, they can be excluding rather than including. And they can be awkward. And, so I think when I use the word community, I feel there needs to be a qualifying word with it, really. I don't know what quite that word is, but we can all probably provide our own. Whereas Ubuntu, I think, is an ideal. It's like a lot of values can be there. It points to an ideal. It points to a state of being interconnected. It implies love. It implies really the feeling of we coming from all, pervading all our dealings with other people. So I love Ubuntu as a concept insofar as I understand it. And I don't know how, whether, and probably now is not the time to ask whether you, Bettina, or Dumi, or anyone else actually grew up in a community which was infused, which practiced Ubuntu. I don't know whether that's true any more than I grew up in a community in reality that probably had all those wonderful community feelings, which I look back on and feel, gosh, wasn't that nice? But I think it's Ubuntu, it seems to me, as a value to aspire to, really. And a very good one for our times.
Beautiful. And I think to answer your question quickly, no, I think Ubuntu is very difficult in the way that our world is set up now, even here in South Africa. And I think that's been a philosophical question many thinkers of Ubuntu have asked themselves: is, can it exist in a larger, more individualized world economically? Can it exist in the same format as it was originally thought of, and in a more communal setting? So thank you so much for that, Charles. And maybe quickly, Melissa, if there's anything that you would like to add to the space, you're captured. That's perfect. Thank you. So maybe then to Joanne, your final thoughts from the session, takeaway or challenge.
My final thoughts are we're doing the best we can. We got this. Stay connected and just, just breathe, and don't forget to laugh. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you so much.
But we got this, we wouldn't be here today if we didn't already have it. So we got.
Thank you, Joanne. And David, your final thoughts.
I just want to thank both you and Alan for modeling, what you'd like to see in the world by bringing people together who are doing values-based work and having conversations where people can get to be heard and to speak their mind and not have to be perfect or right, but to at least feel safe and comfortable to talk about more challenging topics rather than what's the latest that happened with this or the latest that happened with that. So thank you, Bettina, so much for doing such an amazing job in putting this together.
Thank you, David, and thank you to everyone who's been here. Thank you to the US World Values Day team. And so
I do have one other thing. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you because you said I could. But I just want to say this was really powerful, and I would love to see. I always feel like when we have these great Zoom calls, we invite people, but people don't know how cool it is until it's afterwards. So if you ever want to do this again, and you just let me know, and I will totally help put this out together and use, because this was really, really powerful, really powerful. And more people feel like this than we know, than we're talking to. So we're going to get this.
Very true. I think the Zoom meeting ended up being my favorite format, which is just where everybody gets to speak. And I think in large meetings, we hardly ever get that, and we hardly get to hear everyone's voice. So I really do love this, but I agree with you that we need to move it far beyond this space and really think about how we're going to talk about this at the Values Conference and in spaces going from here. But thank you so much, everyone, for your time. I think a lot of food for thought in terms of how we continue, this work of Ubuntu and community and how we understand it. And I think we'll definitely be in contact, and we have other Zoom meetings coming up. So we'll have your email addresses as well. And we'll definitely invite everyone in this team to be part of that. And David, for your fantastic partnership and just coming on board from the get-go and helping us to put this together. Thank you so much, and really have a great morning and evening.
One more quick thing. Bettina, since people who are watching the video may not be able to click on a link, do you want to put a link in the chat for the V20 Summit? Because some of the people who are here are actually in South Africa and may want to attend, or if you just verbally say the link, if it's not that hard, people who are watching can click on it as well. So
perfect. Maybe let me say it out loud. So if you go to Values 20, type that in and into Google, you'll find the Values 20 South Africa page on their website, which has more information about the conference and how you can participate. And I think we'll also send the link to David for everybody who registered if they would like to sign on. It's a completely hybrid conference as well, so you can attend from America and from anywhere in the world. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Enjoy.